He's joining us from Manila. Very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. I want to talk to you about the Marcos campaign. The Marcos family is known for having been linked to human rights abuses and corruption in the past, and the campaign has been accused of essentially rewriting history, and yet Ferdinand Marcos Jr. does seem to be doing well in the polls. Why is it that people in the Philippines are willing to accept all this?
Well, first of all, let's not forget the reason why Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is doing so well, at least based on pre-election surveys, is because presidential daughter Sara Duterte, who's in an even more dominant position for the vice presidential race, decided not to contest the presidency. In fact, last year, before the elections, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was only number 3 in the pre-election surveys. He was at only 13 to 15% of the votes, potential voters, while Sara Duterte was close to a third of preferred voters. Eventually, though, Sara Duterte, lacking national political experience, having no position in national government in the past, she decided not to go head-to-head against the Marcoses, but instead settled for the vice presidency. So a huge part, more than half of the votes that Marcos is expected to get today, is because of Sara Duterte. The number 2 thing we have to keep in mind is this. This is not only about historical memory. This is not only about historical amnesia. This is also about authoritarian nostalgia. Yes, the Philippines has transitioned towards democracy over the past 3 decades or so. But, you know, if you look at the fundamentals of Philippine political system, it's a broken system. 70 to 90% of the legislature is dominated by political dynasties. 40 richest families took home 76% of newly created growth. If you ask an average Filipino, did they feel the democracy over the past few decades? They don't feel invested, because what they saw was more of a liberal oligarchy at best. And in more recent years, we got what they asked for in 2016, which is Rodrigo Duterte. So this is also about nostalgia. But of course, disinformation is a big problem, which raises the question why something was not done about this earlier when more reformist administration were in power. Because pro-Marcos revisionist social media accounts have been there since 2010s. This is a more than a decade-long process of disinformation that has helped the Marcoses to claw their way back to power.
In the event that the Marcos campaign does win, how much of it is it going to be a Marcos leadership, and how much of it is going to be influenced by the Duterte family?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned a while, a big part of this is really Duterte's, Sara Duterte especially, the most likely next vice president, rallying behind him. Now, of course, later on, I expect competition between these two sides, because the Marcoses may also have their own ideas of who they want to come next in the next election cycle, while Sara Duterte is now settling for vice presidency, but clearly she has the presidency within the crosshairs down the road, 6 years down the road. So that's something to watch out for here. Now, as far as Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is concerned, he has been having the cake and eating it too. So on one hand, he has the Marcos name. He has been praising his father. He has been claiming that his father was supposedly a genius who provided certainty and stability and progress for the country. Obviously, facts on the ground were otherwise. But at the same time, if you look at Ferdinand Marcos Jr. himself, I mean, he's very avuncular, he's charming, he's urbane, he's soft-spoken. He has avoided any debate or negative campaigning directly himself. So he has projected this image of a very nice person, someone you can feel comfortable with. So at once, he's taking advantage of his names, the strongman legacy of his father, but at the same time, he's projecting a personal image of someone who is not threatening, someone that you can trust, someone who can bring unity and peace and love and all of those motherhood statements that have dominated this campaign. I mean, this is a guy who has not bothered to attend a single debate organized by Commission on Elections of the Philippines or any legitimate major media. But that has allowed him to essentially create this cordon sanitaire and have the cake and eat it too.
Let me ask you about Leni campaign, because whatever the outcome of this, she has apparently been able to galvanize a lot of the young people within the Philippines. What does that say about possible changing face of politics within the Philippines? If not now, then at some point in the future.
Right. Win or lose, Leni Robredo will have to have a robust movement behind her. A liberal democracy in the Philippines really needs a reboot. It needs a second life. It needs a new narrative. Now, in these elections, in fairness to Leni Robredo, she recognized that people want literally new color. That's why the pink color, right? But people want more than that. people want a progressive break with a dysfunctional democracy. Otherwise, we're going to get stuck in the grip of nostalgic populism and strongman populism represented by the houses of Marcos and Duterte. So Leni, even if she wins, most likely the Congress, the Senate will be dominated by Duterte Marcos allies. The judiciary is traditionally more conservative. So even if she wins today, she will have a hard time ruling as a president unless she has the backing of a robust movement. And if they don't win today, which is what a lot of surveys are projecting, then she has to become a functioning, a strong opposition leader to constrain the worst instincts of an potentially incoming Marcos Duterte administration for years to come.
Really good to get your thoughts on this. Richard Heydarian, we appreciate you joining us on Al Jazeera. So thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure as always.